Welcome to the Deliverance Project. Here are your hosts, Anthony and Melissa.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Deliverance Project. I'm Anthony.
Hello, I'm Melissa.
We're glad that you joined us tonight. We have a crazy episode tonight. We are going to discuss a topic that gets thrown around a lot in the paranormal circles, but it's also something that deliverance ministers and people that work in deliverance ministry are sometimes forced to ask. And we are going to cover the topic of cryptids and giants and Nephilim, that type of thing. But tonight's episode is a little different because tonight we are going to release a photo that we took a while back. We've been sitting on it a little while, and it's a photo that we think will capture your attention. Definitely not claiming that it will prove that beings exist, but we will definitely make you
Very
think.
close.
Yes. So tonight we are going to discuss that topic and present some of our evidence. And before we do that, we need to get into some housekeeping real quick, just to let you know who we are and what we do here. The Deliverance Project exists to help people who are struggling with spiritual warfare, paranormal activity, all of the things that maybe mainstream Christianity wouldn't cover or doesn't like to cover or pretends doesn't exist. But definitely there are people out there in the world that have real stories of their own and they don't know where to share it. Some of these people are in very desperate need of some intervention. And that's where we would like to come in and help in terms of what we do here. It's basically tell us your story. We're here to pray for you. We're here to pray with you. No judgment, as Melissa just said. And we are here to kind of, maybe tackle this from a knowledge / prayer / love type of intervention.
Yeah, very good. I like that.
Versus just, hearing your story and saying, well, bummer, or hearing your story and saying, it's because you're not following Jesus hard enough, or,
exactly.
well, you kind of get what you get. We want to be just a place that's safe for you to tell your story. So if you have a story of your own, we want you to reach out to us at the Deliverance Project Podcast at gmail.com. We will entertain, audio files, letters. We will entertain just requests or even questions. And if you are somebody who feels comfortable sharing it on the air, we'll even do an interview with you if that's what you prefer to do. But we are here to help, definitely. Also, you can reach out to us on the socials as well. Please check out the show notes. You'll find out where we are on basically almost all the socials. We will be available through DM if you want to reach out to us. Just make sure that you let us know that, kind of give us like a precursor at the beginning what your correspondence is about, because, as with socials, as your platforms grow, a lot of it's spam and garbage and ridiculousness. And we just want to not ever skip over your inquiry. So
yeah, exactly.
if you reach out to us through DM, just start out by saying, here, my name is this, and I want to talk to you about your podcast or something like that. And then we'll be happy to help you. Also, just want to remind you that last week we began the latest saga in the Struggle series, which is our other podcast. That saga is entitled The Cabal. And the Cabal is basically what we would consider book 4 of the Struggle series. And chapter 1 was released. We had some decent feedback about it. So if you haven't heard that yet, you can go to the Struggle series. That is on the podcast apps that you would find this podcast. It's all the same. And let us know. Obviously, we would say that if you've never heard it, go all the way back to season 1, or what we'd call the Struggle, which is book 1. Start there. But if you want to start on book 4, the Cabal, you're more than welcome to do so. And we're writing that one as we go. So in between the chapters, we might do some spooky stories, but you're definitely going to start seeing those episodes released, at least I would say every week, every other week ish. But sometimes life happens, right? So check that out for us as well. As usual, as Melissa always says, like, subscribe,
Yeah, thanks
leave
for
us
the
reviews.
new subscribers.
Yeah, definitely. And we want to just welcome everybody in who's new. And tonight you're going to get maybe a slightly different take than what we normally do, but similar, because normally what we'll do is maybe entertain a letter and kind of focus on the topic of the letter. This episode did result from a very brief correspondence we had, but we've been sitting on this photo trying to figure out, okay, when are we going to put this in? And we thought it's time. So the correspondence came from somebody anonymous. And so I don't feel like reading the letter, which is just a couple of paragraphs, is really relevant, because I'm not giving a shout out to the person who wrote it because it came in anonymous. But the letter basically summed up says this. It says, I am a Christian, but I believe in Bigfoot. What are your thoughts on that? Because I've shared it with a lot of other Christians, and I assume it's a she by the way the pronouns were, but that she takes a beating. So when she shares it with Christian friends, family, whatever, that people give her a hard time. And so I get asked, yeah, it's sad,
Just in
isn't it?
basic conversation, like they can't even talk about it. That's
Well, Christians are weird because Christians, and man, right off the bat, if you're new with us, you're going to hear kind of our bias here. I love Christianity. I love Jesus. Melissa loves Jesus probably more than all of us put together. We are very devout followers of Jesus, but we are not real big fans of organized religion here. And so you're going to hear some of that in my speech, because I'm not afraid to talk about it.
Yes,
If you are new, I worked in vocational ministry for many years, different churches, different parts of the country. And although I enjoyed my time there, if I'm honest, I'm a rebel. I don't really fit in well with organized anything. So some of that is my fault. So I felt that, I'm called to a more kind of parachurch type a situation. I'm not saying I'd never work in a church again, but it would have to be a different type of church. Definitely not somebody who's saying that we're not biblical here. We're just saying that religion tends to be built accidentally or on purpose to control people, and therefore they control the information. And, people will argue about what color carpet should go in the church and divide a church and split it into two over stupid things, right? Not just the leaders, but the people. And so that's kind of stuff we don't like. And so to answer your question, Melissa, yeah, in everyday conversation, if you talk to a Christian about something they're not schooled on or have never considered, or even in some really, really religious sects, maybe I'll pick on the Catholics a little bit. A lot of them are not Bible readers. They just take what the priest or the pastor says.
I didn't know that much about it until one of your other episodes. Like, wow.
So if you say something like Bigfoot, it's easy to say, well, those don't exist. Why are you talking about that weirdo? But then when you take those same Christians and say, well, then explain to me what happened in Genesis chapter 6 when these angels came to earth, forsook their duty, took on human form, and chose to have sex with human women and produce this hybrid group of beings called the Nephilim that were giants on the earth. When you hear that, you'll shock them. They'll be like, wait a minute. What? That's in the Bible? Yeah, it's in the Bible. So then they'll go to their pastor, and the pastor will say, well, it actually wasn't the fallen angels. The term B'nai Elohim means the sons of God. And so those were the sons of Seth. And okay, well, how did those people produce giants? Well, Seth must have had some giant kind of DNA that more, you see, they don't really have an answer to something that's very, 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 kind of obscure, but not as obscure as they want it to be. They don't have an answer because it doesn't really meet the gospel message. And I would give the churches a lot of benefit because they're just trying to preach the gospel. And this is kind of clouding or confusing. Then, you take them to a passage where they talk about this big beast in the seas called Leviathan. And well, could that have been a dinosaur? Could that, so Christians, like, if you're listening and you're kind of getting uncomfortable, ask yourself, what were the dinosaurs? I heard a Christian the other day say they're not real, they're fake, and all those bones are actually not real. And they say they dig these up because they're trying to disprove the Christian
Oh,
timeline of how
yes,
old the earth
always.
is.
Mm-hmm.
And could that be true? I don't know. But here's what I'm going to say.
Mm-hmm.
What the topic we're going to cover today is one that if you fully grasp it, a lot of things in the Bible start to make a lot more sense. This topic of this seed of Satan that is talked about in Genesis chapter 3, where God is punishing the serpent, and he said, there will be enmity or there'll be war between her seed, the
Mm-hmm.
human
Yep.
woman,
Yep.
Eve, and
Mm-hmm.
your seed. Well, who is the seed of Satan? See, right off the bat, 3
Mm-hmm.
chapters in, you're having to contend with this very crazy concept.
Mm-hmm.
So did that mean that the demons, did that mean, well, it's a seed. It's Satan's seed. If the demons are the fallen angels, Satan didn't create those, God did.
Right.
So
Yep.
that can't be Satan's seed.
Mm-hmm.
This has to be a group of beings that were created, I would say, bastardly outside of God's creation. Well,
Mm-hmm.
how was that done? Well, then when you get to Genesis chapter 6, if you're following the path, you see that how this was done.
Mm-hmm.
But Christians don't like to deal with that, and
The Bible has a lot of good stuff in it.
it
Yep.
is if you read it with purpose and
Yeah,
not,
exactly.
if you can see it as a story, and then
Mm-hmm.
the curiosity of an obscure passage will take over instead of you skimming over it
Exactly.
because
If
it
it
didn't
don't
make sense.
sense.
Do
Mm-hmm.
some study.
Mm-hmm.
But back to what we're saying. So Christians, what would you do with this stuff? Do you really believe it's fake? Do you believe, because there's lots of this stuff in the Bible?
Mm-hmm.
These demons that Jesus contended with, um, in the Gerasenes, they asked to be put into pigs. Do you know
Mm-hmm.
what that means? That means that demons can inhabit animals,
Mm-hmm.
not just people, but animals. So, as I was saying,
Mm-hmm.
if you really understand this topic, a lot of concepts in the Bible will make more sense if you choose to allow it. Is it necessary for your faith or your spirituality? Probably not, but it may help you understand. And I would even go as far as to say it'll definitely help you understand the end times, because a lot of the imagery and stuff that we read in Revelations will have a
Mm-hmm.
lot more, I guess, vivid understanding
Standing.
to that
Yeah.
if you understand this concept. So,
Yep.
to
It's in
answer
there.
this person's question, do I believe there is a Bigfoot? My answer to that is yes. And why is that? Well, number one, I've seen one. And number two, I believe that biblically, as well as some extra canonical, extra biblical works, will give us an idea of what these things may be.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'll get to the story of when I've seen one, but
Yep.
we'll talk about that. And then we'll also talk about this photo a little bit later. So we are going to cover this topic in general. If you go back and listen to some of our other episodes, we may have given you more detail biblically, but I think this is a nice extension of that.
Yeah.
Before we jump too far deep, Melissa, I want to ask you about any thoughts you have, any beliefs that you had, and then now have maybe changed, or have you ever had any encounters with anything that would be considered a cryptid, a monster, a chimera, all of the terms that are used, but some sort of weird creature that should not be here?
Well, I have always believed in Bigfoot. Just like what you were saying about the Nephilims and the fallen angels having sex with animals and women. I hate saying that, but so yeah, I've always believed that, why not? Like, if we're here, and it's funny, this may be off topic, but I was just thinking the other day, like God made all of us the animals and humans, and like if you think about it, most of us, we all have two eyes, we all have ears, we all have nose, we all have, you know, four legs. I mean, we walk on two, but the dogs have four. And so as things have evolved, and it's just so many of them, so many people have seen them and like stories, about them. And but I think they're just hard to catch up with. Like they're very smart. They're very They don't like to be out in public. They kind of hide. They don't want to be seen too much. I don't think I've ever heard a Bigfoot hurting anyone. It seems like they kind of stay away. So it's almost like a human and a bear got together or something, or an
Maybe
ape and a
not too far from the truth, but keep going.
But I don't think I've ever seen any animal, or thank God I haven't, that would make me go, I wonder what that is. See some weird, I love watching like National Geographic, like the Animal Planet. We was watching it the other night, and I'm sure people have heard of these fish. If you haven't, you have to like Google it, that has like human teeth.
Oh yeah.
The one last night.
Creepy.
Like human, really full teeth, calcium and everything, just not fish teeth, like our size teeth. So I do believe in that. And then also like the other animals that they're finding thousands of years later that they thought were extinct, like in the ocean. And all of us, they're finding them.
Millions of
Millions,
years.
yeah, that they're still finding them. So good genes.
For those of you, like just to give an example of Melissa saying, you can Google this. There's a creature called the coelacanth. And for years and years and years, they had fossils of these things, and they said that these things are millions of years old. And then they found one.
Yeah.
One washed up on a beach. And so obviously science isn't as exact as people like it to be. And because of all the politics nowadays, people really have really destroyed what science means. But science is just a pursuit of the truth, and through a process where you try to eliminate all other options until you kind of know what you have. Like true science is done by forming a null hypothesis and then trying to disprove it, and then figuring out what's true and what's not, so on and so forth. I don't want to get too technical there, but so if I want to form a hypothesis that this water I'm drinking contains, a chemical that will give me superhuman strength, I don't just say, well, I'm going to drink it until I see if I get superhuman strength or not, because you haven't eliminated or introduced factors that can get you to the truth. So what you do is you say, this water doesn't give me superhuman strength. And then you do everything you can to go in that direction. And if you can't get there, well, then maybe it does. So if I say it doesn't, but the more I drink, next thing you know, I'm lifting up a car. Well, maybe it's not the water, but you definitely need to study me to figure out what happened. And then through a series of events, you're eventually going to trace it. So science, isn't exact, because the truth is something that's very, very immense. So it's hard for us to grasp. And so when you think of a creature like a coelacanth that they were so sure was extinct because of how they view fossils, now it forces them to say, well, how did this fossil, these things must have been around for whatever millions of years, instead of going, maybe we were wrong. And so what I always tell people, just kind of as a preliminary way to start this thing, is that by me studying these things about the fallen angels, the Nephilim, the Rephaim, which were giants after the flood, Nephilim being before the flood, looking at other cultures, looking at, the Anunnaki and what these people were supposedly, who they were and where they kind of showed up on Earth and what they represent, that type of thing. By studying all of this, I may not have the answer to the questions, but I have an answer to just about every question when it comes to paranormal. So people may say, well, you and your God nonsense or whatever. Okay, well, then you give me an answer. And their answer is, well, I don't know. Nobody really knows. Well, I know. You can't tell me I don't know, just as much as I can't tell you don't know. But I at least have an answer. So when somebody says to me, is there a Bigfoot? I actually believe there is, but I also have an explanation or at least an avenue to go down when it comes to this belief system
Mhm.
versus people who have no belief system and then all of a sudden see one.
Mhm.
Because even though they've seen it, know it's real, now they still don't have a framework of where they're going to
Because you
put that.
can't, yeah. You can't believe what you just saw. You're
Yeah.
always second guessing.
So let's take a Bigfoot, for example. It could be as simple as this is some sort of ape-like creature that is
Mhm.
bipedal. It's a mammal. It is something that is not in the fossil record. And by the way, evolution, they say a missing link. Some people would say, well, that's where it belongs. But
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
lot of holes in that if you really dig deep. But let's
Mhm.
just say it's some unidentified creature that is very intelligent
Mhm.
and has the ability to escape via tunnels or something like that. And so you can never catch them because they're very fast, very strong. And if you do catch one, it kills you, rips you to pieces, takes you away, and nobody finds you. And, so like if you look at David Paulides' work with the missing 411 and you realize how many people go missing from forests, it's
Yeah,
like, it's like a shocking
six
number.
hundred thousand a year or
Some
something?
craziness,
Like, wow.
craziness. So who is taking these people?
Mhm.
And it's funny because there'll be people that listen to this and people that do other podcasts that'll say, well, of course it wasn't a Bigfoot. Bigfoots don't exist. What it was aliens. And
Yeah.
that arrogance of like,
Mhm.
well, I know it was aliens and not Bigfoot, but in a way, I will come across that way, but that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying my belief system gives an explanation. I don't have a Bigfoot carcass to present to you to say, here
Mhm.
it is. Haha, I was right. I have stories and knowledge that allows me to have a framework to work it in. You can take it or leave it. I'm not going to tell you for sure that big feet exist in the form that you think they do, but I could tell you I've seen a creature that would fit into that category. And I have knowledge of the Bible and the book of
Mhm.
Enoch and the book of Jasher, the book of Giants, other things that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls that would say there's at least an answer. And so when I put all that together, I'm very confident that I saw a creature that would be known as Bigfoot. However, do I specifically 100% know what it is? I don't.
Mhm.
I know I saw it, I could describe it to you, and then I can tell you what I believe they are. So let's jump to that.
Okay.
When I was a young child, my stepfather, he was a hunter. And so God bless his soul, didn't wasn't the best dad figure I could have had, but there were some times where, I learned some stuff and there was some like father son type moments.
Mhm.
And one of the things that he did share with me was the love of hunting. And so when I was fairly young, I'm guessing 9-ish, and I don't quite remember, but I was about 9-ish. I went on the first little kind of camping/hunting trip. Now, I can tell you that trip wasn't as hardcore as some of the other trips we went on as I got older. So my suspicions were, Melissa, is that this was my stepdad telling my mom they were going hunting and they took some rifles, but they were really just going to drink beer in the woods. Because
The guys hanging
I don't
out.
remember a
Yeah.
gun firing at any sort of animal whatsoever. But this was a deer hunting trip, so it
Mhm.
wasn't too high up in the mountains. And so I remember he had this old white Chevy Impala. So I'm a 70s kid. So if that kind of gives you any idea, Impalas were not very high up off the ground. So if we drove an Impala to a hunting site, it makes sense that it wasn't too far deep in the woods because that
Mhm.
Impala wouldn't have made it very far. So we kind of turned up this road, this windy mountain road, and then we parked the car down off on the road, just off the side of the road. But the guys with trucks actually drove up a little hill and then parked their trucks up there. And that's where they set up the camp. There was tents and so on and so forth. So, so the car almost could make it up there, but not quite. And
Mhm.
so it was getting fairly late at night, and my memory is vague as can be, but on certain things, but on other things, it's pretty clear. So I know there was a bunch of guys drinking beer, laughing, having fun. Definitely no animals coming by that were screaming and howling, laughing, and talking nonsense or whatever. And I got tired, and I was falling asleep. There was not really chairs for all of us because I don't know if my stepdad was too prepared or if he kind of went last minute. So I said I was tired, and I was all bundled up in my little outdoor gear, my little
Yeah.
hunting gear.
Uh-huh.
And he said, well, you need to just go sleep in the car. Now, as a 9-year-old boy, for those of you who've listened to my books and heard this podcast, I was a pretty scared little boy because demons harassed me a lot. So the thought of being out in the dark woods, away from the fire, away from the camp, was very scary as it was. So he walked me down the hill. And when I say it was pretty far, it was, I would say 60 yards, almost a football field. So you kind of walk through the clearing, maybe
Mm-hmm.
about 10 yards, and then you went kind of down a hill, not very steep, but steep enough where you have to slow and kind of turn your feet sideways.
Mm-hmm.
So I made it down the hill, and I got to the car, and I told him I was scared. And of course, I got the, you need to grow up, you're a scared little boy
Mm-hmm.
talk that I always had. And so I finally just got in the car, shut the door. There was some blankets in there, but it was freezing cold. And so I was
Yeah.
bundled up and, kind of just my little nose sticking out. I had a stocking cap on and the hood of my jacket on, but it was pretty cold. But it was doable. You can sleep. So somewhere in the night, I dozed off. And I'm thinking just from memory, I was awake maybe for 30 minutes, kind of just looking up in the back seat, like through the window where you can kind of laying on your back and you
You
can
can
kind of
see
see
the
through the
moon.
window, seeing the
Uh-huh.
stars and stuff. I couldn't see
Yeah.
the moon, but so I was, my head was on the driver's side of the car in the back seat.
Mm-hmm.
And so big bench seats on those cars. You
Oh,
could
yeah.
probably a 6-foot tall human could have laid across that. So I was fine. And I dozed off on my back. Now, I'm guessing I was asleep an hour, so 30 minutes of laying there terrified, saying my little prayers. Maybe about an hour goes by, and I wake up, and looking in the window of that car was what I would consider about an 8-foot tall ape-like creature with a very demonic looking face, with kind of amber-ish eyes. Like, if you don't know what amber is, like your lights on your car that are kind of orangish yellow
Mm-hmm.
and they reflect.
Mm-hmm.
So they were kind of amberish. A lot of people say big feet have red eyes. This one didn't. It was very amber because the light that must have been from the moon was reflecting off its eyes, because the creature was so dark
Mm-hmm.
that I was struggling to look up into the dark. It was basically, if you looked out the window, it was very black. It wasn't like a night where the sky
It's
is,
all
yeah, it was pretty
white.
dark.
Yeah.
And so the only thing
Aw.
you could see was stars. And so I jumped up and scooted kind of to the middle of the car. And because it was leaning down, looking into the window, I would say that it almost got on its knees, stooped very low, and looked inside the car.
Mm-hmm.
Now, 9-year-old kid, maybe 8. Um, what do you do? Right? Do I go out the other door? Like, you're thinking these things like, how do I survive? It is
Mm-hmm.
definitely a survival moment. And so I made the decision that running is not going to be good. Then this thing tried the door. Now, if you remember these old cars, they had a handle and the
The
button
button. Yeah.
that you pushed. The handle didn't pull. The handle was like you held onto it and you pushed the button to open the door. So it's trying the door, but I don't think it realized that you pushed the button. I think it was just pulling the handle. So the car started to rock back and forth. And so I am now screaming at the top of my lungs. I could hear the men laughing, but I guarantee you they couldn't hear me. So I, through
Oh
probably
boy.
about
Yikes.
20 seconds of terror, kind of snapped out of it and made a decision to jump over into the front seat. And the whole time I'm thinking, are the doors locked? How I know the thing wasn't pushing the button is because I'm looking at all the doors and they all have that little thing that's up, the
Mm-hmm.
little post
Mm-hmm.
that you locked the door, you pushed it down or you pulled it up. There was
Yeah.
no power locks on this
I
car.
remember those.
They were all open. And I'm
Ah.
like, if this thing figures out how to open this door, I'm done. But I had decided to jump into the front seat so I can honk the horn.
Mm-hmm.
And so I start honking the crap out of that horn. And I mean, laying on it, then letting it off and hitting it 2 or 3 times and then letting off and laying
Aw.
it again. And this thing, as I'm looking through the window, because I'm now sitting in the driver's seat, but I'm trying to lean away from the window. And I'm thinking any moment it's going to punch through the window,
Mm-hmm.
through the glass. Thank God all the windows were up because it was cold. Because if they would have been down, I think I would have been taken. I
On the
really do.
summer. Yep.
And all of a sudden it turns and looks up the hill. It goes around the front of the car and I'm watching it. And in 2 leaps, it's down this embankment into the trees. And I guarantee you, as a grown man, those 2 leaps would have taken me 10.
Mm-hmm.
It was so fast, so nimble, and it was gone. Of course, here comes my stepfather, and here comes his buddy, Sam. I'll never forget Sam. Won't say a last name. They come barreling down the hill, stumbling drunk, of course. And they're like, you had a nightmare. And so I protested and said, you are not leaving me in this car. You need to take me home. And he finally looked at his buddy Sam and said, well, I guess it's time for me to go to bed. So he slept in the car with me in the front seat. I slept in the back.
Mm-hmm.
So as you think about that, there is a Bigfoot story. Yeah, I don't think you've ever heard me tell that story, but there is a Bigfoot story that a Christian man, I was born Catholic, raised Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
tried to tell these people what happened, and instantly I was not believed.
Mm-hmm.
Tried to tell a couple other people, including a priest that when I was an altar boy, told me these things didn't exist. Now, how could you tell me something doesn't exist when I'm wide awake?
Mm-hmm.
Now, could it have been a sleep paralysis thing? Not when you jump over the seat of the car
Yeah. And it's
and are
still
sitting in the
there,
front seat and you're honking the horn. And the
following you
reason
around
the
the
men
car.
came over the hill was
Mm-hmm.
because you were honking the horn. And it's not like you jumped in the front seat and were honking the horn, but you never saw the thing again. I
Mm-hmm.
saw it following me from the back door to the front door around the front of the car and watch it leave, wide awake. So if I just saw it when I first woke up and then it disappeared, sleep,
Like, mm-hmm.
dream.
Yeah.
So do I believe Bigfoot exists? Sure do. Now, what are your thoughts on that before
Well, see how intelligent they are? They know how to try to open the door. They know to go around. They know to leave. When they hear your stepfather and the other men coming, they don't hang around to try to, yikes. That's terrifying. I
Yeah.
would have
Now,
pooped my pants.
what's crazy is that I continued to go hunting, continued to be in the woods, and we never slept in the car after that. We always had a tent and fire and
I would rather sleep in the car.
big sleeping bags. But
give me a little more security.
But I would rather sleep where 6 or 8 men.
Oh yeah, exactly. I wouldn't want to be
with rifles.
Isolated. Yeah, exactly.
And I think at 9 or 10, I probably had my hunter safety card, so I was able to shoot
Mm-hmm.
a gun, but I didn't have one in the car. And I mean, would I've even had the courage to shoot this thing? And the question becomes, what is it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, again,
Yeah, exactly.
could this be some very intelligent ape-like hominin?
I mean, apes and they are very intelligent.
Very intelligent.
Just like us. They're just big and covered in hair.
And what did it want from me? Some people say that these things are very docile creatures. There's stories of a kid fallen in a lake or being lost somewhere and saying some big monkey man lifted me up out of the water and set me on the shore, or carried me and dropped me off at a farm because I was
Yeah, then
lost.
they just walk away.
So,
Wow.
so this thing seemed like it was after me. So I can't attest to the fact that they're kind, nice creatures because it wasn't nice to me. Um, was it curious? I don't know I mean, was it snarling and baring its teeth to me? No, but it wanted to get me.
Mm-hmm.
Now you get into even more difficulty when you think, are these all the same type of creature? Is it the same creature that travels the earth? Is it different species? Like the
Yeah, different
Yeti is
states.
white, and
Yeah.
the
Uh-huh.
the ones down in the swamps
Kansas.
in
Yep.
Louisiana are
Anna.
different than the Pacific Northwest in Washington and Oregon. What are these things? This was
Mm-hmm.
in the mountains of Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
So southern Colorado-ish mountains. So Rocky Mountain, mountain range. Could this thing travel up and down that corridor? What's their range? Some bears can have a 20-mile range of where they
Mm-hmm.
live. Some animals have a very much bigger range.
Mm-hmm.
That as amount they'll travel that they consider their territory. So you said something crazy. So what is this, like a bear type human hybrid? Is it a monkey type human hybrid? So you really have to start to imagine how these creatures came about.
Mm-hmm.
So this woman who wrote this letter that said, I believe in Bigfoot, I believe you if you're listening. I believe you saw what you saw. I believe that it was terrifying because not just because it's new, but it's terrifying because we have a sense. We have a pit bull chocolate lab mix. Some of you have seen Cuddy in our videos. Cuddy is a very kind, docile type dog. He loves to jump on people, but he just wants pets.
Mm-hmm.
But there's been a couple of times where other bigger dogs try to mess with him, and you see that pit bull come
Oh
out,
yeah.
and he don't lose. He can hold his own, and he's 60 pounds, and he'll fight a 120-pound dog and win, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know, like, our energy gets different when a big dog's coming and snarling at him and we feel him start pulling on the leash. There's a sense that we have that an animal can be dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, we would think that if you saw this big creature, of course, the size of it would scare you, but you would also have that instinct of this is dangerous. So when this woman speaks in this letter about feeling a sense of danger and then trying to explain it to people, nobody believe you, it's because they don't have a framework to put this in.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna kind of go down this rabbit hole. So let's think of this civilization known as the Anunnaki. Now, Melissa, probably before me, never watched a documentary about the Anunnaki ever. She probably heard it, watched 10 minutes of it, and said, this is nerdy stuff. I'm out. But a lot of people say that the ancient Sumerians were the oldest civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll start to use artifacts and writings, and they say, well, the Sumerian language is the oldest written language. And I don't disagree with any of that, but there's no proof that they were the first civilization. As a matter of fact, I believe that after the flood, there was a guy named Nimrod who came and became this guy known as Gilgamesh, which was part of the Sumerian people, where we get this story of the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think of these Anunnaki people, if you've ever seen their depictions, they're like these bird-like gods that
Mm-hmm.
kind of, and they're in their human form, and you'll see them with like these long beards and stuff.
Uh-huh.
But what makes sense to me is the Anunnaki were a group of watchers
Mm-hmm.
that came down, had sex with these human women, had these giant Nephilim beings. And so were the Anunnaki the fallen angels? Were the Nephilim children of the Watcher Angels, the Anunnaki? I don't know, but I know that it makes sense as to how these kind of chimera, kind of hybrid creatures could come about.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take
Yeah.
Egypt, for example. You have a god Anubis. Okay. Anubis is known to have the head of a jackal, the kind of a canine head,
Mm-hmm.
and the body of a human. Now, it's funny how Christians, as well as, kind of just everyday normal humans, will go, well, the Egyptians were kind of creative and they thought their gods looked like that. I want you to think of just say what I say. I want you to think of how ridiculous that is.
Mm-hmm.
They were emulating something that they saw. Now, when you read in the Bible, in the book of Enoch, where these watcher angels were not only having sex with women, but they got creepy and were also procreating with animals. So if I'm a watcher angel and I have some supernatural kind of thing going on that, if you ask me how that works, I don't. Was it
Yeah.
actual physical sexual relations with the woman? I think so, because the descriptions kind of speak of that. Or was it just genetic alteration? And that's what they meant by taking wives, because they were inseminating them. I don't know. I wasn't there, but there was
Mm-hmm.
something going on. So what would happen if they were also, and so let's back up. So they're having sex with these women and this giant was produced. What is in their DNA that made the offspring of a human woman plus this angel become a giant?
Mm-hmm.
Also, there was these little people. So were some of the watcher angels able to produce
Giants.
and some little people?
Mm-hmm.
What some cultures would consider fairies and gnomes and things like that, because I believe all of this stuff has roots in the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
whether or not people still believe in gnomes, because way back in our history there were these creatures, and then we just keep the folklore alive as a way to tell the story,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
or they still exist. See how we get kind of creepy? Now watch this.
Uh-huh.
What would happen if a watcher angel had sex with an animal? What makes us think that if some of this produced a giant, why wouldn't it produce some sort of hybrid creature,
Mm-hmm.
like a dog-headed human
Mm-hmm.
or a bull-headed human, like a Taurus or a Minotaur or a Centaur?
Mm-hmm.
What makes us think that these things can happen? And so you either have to say none of this happened, or you have to say it did happen and I just don't know about it. So I'll just let the people that kind of know about it have the floor. But when you start to say, well, none of that ever happened, or I don't think it happened that way. Well, how did it happen? Well, I don't know. Why are you arguing if you don't know? Because you don't want it to be true, or because it seems too crazy? Well, Christians
Yeah.
Christians need to really get off the high horse about believing this type of stuff, because you also believe that a bearded old guy parted a sea and a big fish swallowed a guy and spit him up on a beach in Nineveh. You also believe that a virgin gave birth to our Savior. There are supernatural things that occur. So
Mm-hmm.
why are you so limited in your scope when the Bible clearly tells us that these angels had sex with women and produced giants?
Mm-hmm.
That is supernatural. That's crazy. Like Melissa said, what a cool story. What, like, let's just talk about how cool that is.
Mm-hmm.
So why do we struggle as Christians with paranormal concepts, including cryptids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's take, for example, we've said this 100 times. How were these huge temple complexes
Oh yeah.
built? We don't have tools or equipment that can lift these stones.
Even today, when they try to recreate it or reenact it, they can't. Even with the machinery today, can't
Yeah.
pick up those stones
Can you
that they
imagine a
measured.
stone that weighs, I think the biggest stone they've ever found, it was like an obelisk that was never uprighted. It was just built on its side.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 3 million pounds.
Mm-hmm.
There's stones in the pyramids that are tens of thousands of pounds, million pounds, some of them. And the quarry it was not like they dug it out of the ground right there and just lifted it. The quarry is miles and miles away. How did these stones get here? There was some other technology that existed. Also, could a Nephilim then start having sex with animals? And that's what
A Bigfoot and these
a
other.
Bigfoot was, right? Or Anubis was, or the dog man. So if Anubis was the first dog man, or that procedure that created Anubis also creates a dog man. So what you're really getting into, Melissa, is you're getting into where we really have to struggle as Christians. The Bible says that there were giants before the flood, and then there were giants after the flood. How did the giants, if God wiped out every living thing on earth except for what was in that ark, how did these giants appear? Now, some cultures and beliefs think that King Og, the one in the Bible that had the really big bed, we've talked about him, of Bashan, that he actually hung on to the ark and kind of stowed away, right? And he was a giant that then, kind of perpetrated this. Some people say that one of Noah's daughter-in-laws that were married to one of his sons didn't have pure blood. And therefore, when they started procreating, they had Nephilim kind of DNA that kind of resurged. But I don't see God doing that. It doesn't make sense to me. Could it be? Sure, I wasn't there again. But what makes more sense is these things were reintroduced. Now, I believe it's one of two things. Either other watcher angels decided to take the same leap and start doing this stuff again with humans, or the demons, who we learn are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, began to reintroduce themselves because, remember, this vast knowledge that the watchers had was imparted to them because they were the children of these things. Before this time, we didn't know how to make a sword. We didn't know how to get metal out of ore to make a sword, let alone make a sword out of metal and then use it as a weapon. These things were taught to us: cosmetics, sorcery, pharmacology, all of these things that were taught to us. I mean, just think of it like this. There is a zillion plants on the planet. Who told us to smoke marijuana?
And who told us to drink milk from a cow versus other animals?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, who decided, oh, well, go over there and...
Well, trial and error. Trial and error. But like the marijuana thing, for example, if you're standing by a campfire, your instinct isn't to breathe in. Somebody somewhere in our lineage taught us that if you take that plant and do this with it, it will probably be uncomfortable, but if you light it on fire and breathe in the smoke, you're going to get some euphoric feeling. This is pharmacology. You take the roots of that plant and you smash it up and you do this. And when you have this ailment, you take that and it will heal you.
You take this berry, you do this, you have makeup.
At a time when science, quote unquote, tells us that we were cavemen.
Right.
It almost proves the point even more, especially if we were cavemen. Who told us that? But I believe very strongly that we were probably smarter then than we are now. We like to believe because we are progressing technologically that we're smarter now. But I believe we had a lot of knowledge then that's been lost, right? So if these Nephilim spirits, these disembodied spirits, began to speak to humans like Nimrod and said, if you do this ritual, kind of this weird sex magic or weird kind of mystical ritual, you will become a mighty man. Because remember, it says in the Bible that Nimrod began to be a mighty man is the translation that you hear a lot that people have translated into English, but it actually says Nimrod began to be a giant. So he wasn't born a giant. I've even heard some people say, well, that's because he was young, and then because they lived a lot longer, then he kept growing, and then pretty soon come on, man. Like, he began to be a giant, and next thing you know, he's a city builder. And next thing you know, they're building this city that God has to come down and send all these people to different places on the earth. And then he also assigns Elohim, lower
Mm-hmm.
level gods, over each region. Now,
Mm-hmm.
were those the ones that came down and taught
Mm.
humans how to become giants again and taught them all this mysticism? Was it the Nephilim knowledge that was passed through
Oh yeah,
spirits?
yeah.
And then
Uh-huh.
they began to, inspire humans, and then they took on these forms and became supernatural beings, and then they were the ones that build these temple structures. Were the temple structures built before the flood and we just don't know how to date them, like the Sphinx, for example?
Mm-hmm.
You talk to people about the Sphinx, some people say it's 12,000 years old, some people say, well, it couldn't have been because of this dating, and then some people say, well, that head isn't the original head, but somebody recarved it. Well, maybe it was pre-flood. As a matter of
Mm-hmm.
fact, a lot of people have said that if you go to the Sphinx, it has water damage in the middle of the desert.
Mm-hmm.
So how is that? Well, we don't
Yeah.
know, but we do have some semblance of an answer of what these creatures could be.
Good stuff. Yep.
Okay, so now, Melissa, let's ask you a very tough question because, Bigfoot is the well known one, but I don't want to pigeonhole you there. We have watched one of our favorite episodes of These Woods Are Haunted is the one about the werewolf. But if you could think of any being that would fall into the cryptid, chimera type of, hybrid type being, thing that shouldn't be on Earth, but is kind of hiding in the shadows, which one is the most believable?
Mm, I would say probably Bigfoot and the what do they call it? Like the werewolf.
The dog man?
Is it the dog man or is there
Well,
another one?
there's
Like
werewolf.
I just saw a
Yeah, that,
werewolf.
yeah, that's
So the
that.
lady, the female transform
Yeah,
because it's because it's like they still have the body of almost like a human, a man's or woman's body, like the features, two arms, two legs are standing up straight. They have breasts, they have, and then, but they have like an animal head.
they
They
transform.
transform into something. So I would say like the Louisiana,
The Rougarou.
the Rougarou,
Yeah,
and maybe the Bigfoot.
sure. And the Rougarou or the Lougarou, depending
Lookaroo,
on
yeah.
the origins and how people pronounce it. The story of that is very Skinwalker-esh, which means this is a human that something happened to them and they developed this kind of anomaly within their bodies and they transform. So the Rougarou could be a human, and then it sometimes morphs. I think there was another episode of These Woods Are Haunted. Man, we're giving them a plug. It hasn't been on the air for a while. That's the best paranormal show I've ever seen,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion. But I think they didn't renew it. But there's the one where the two hunters, they're kind of hunting guys, and the wife says she keeps seeing this thing outside,
Oh yeah.
and so they
Yep.
go and they track it down, and they go to this cabin, and they walk in the cabin,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got like chains, so like somebody chains themselves up in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go to the gas station and see the guy,
Oh yeah.
and he's
Yeah.
like hides in the shadows back there. And that's these are true stories that people tell, so that would be
Mm-hmm.
kind of a Rougarou type werewolf type transformation where they can be part human sometimes and part not. And then now you can see where some Christians would say, well, that's when they're in full possession.
Mm-hmm.
And when they have a reprieve, they go back to their normal
Normal
features,
features, yeah.
which could also be true.
Mm-hmm.
I hope what you're hearing, listeners, is that we can have an honest conversation as Christians or even as non-believers, and say that this topic isn't off the table. And
Mm-hmm.
as more cameras exist in the world, we're going to find a lot more of these things. We're also going to get a lot more hoaxers because people are looking for views and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you're
Yeah.
starting to see that there's a whole lot more out there, like trail cameras, for example. Like
Mm-hmm.
these people that put these trail cameras out there and they're going frame by frame, and all of a sudden there's like some ghost lady just standing
Just,
there,
yeah, in the
see
middle of the
through,
woods. Mm-hmm.
and then she's not in the next frame, or there's some where like a Bigfoot type creature will like stick its eye into the camera because they know they're there,
There.
type
Oh,
thing.
yeah. They're intelligent.
So we have to kind of say, okay, what are your thoughts? And I'm not gonna push an agenda today. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just trying to get people to think.
Mm-hmm. And like
So
a lot of things like the Indians, believed in, and like their, what they experience, and um like when we watch Love the Skinwalker Ranch
mhm.
story, like those episodes, and a lot of the Indians won't even talk about like skinwalkers or anything
Yeah, they're
like
not
that
supposed to say
because they're
it.
not supposed to say it. I mean, and that's generations and generations, hundreds of years passed down, and they still. And even like there was one gentleman on there, he did mention it, and I think something happened to him, and then no one else in the community would meet with them and talk about it anymore.
Sure. Well, and so like if you think of like a Skinwalker Ranch, this place with tons of anomalies. If you've never seen that show, watch it. A lot of it seems more alien than it does cryptid. But I mean, you have orbs floating right through a mesa,
Mm-hmm.
traveling at an enormous speed that literally goes into the side of a mountain and comes out
Mm-hmm.
on camera. I mean, that's the one show where there's so much evidence.
Yeah, and these
It's
are very
crazy.
intelligent people. They're
Yeah,
not
these are scientists,
scientists, and
government scientists and other private scientists that are catching these anomalies at a high rate. So we have to look at these things and say there's something in this world that's supernatural that we're not privy to. We're not, we're not fully aware of. Maybe because for the longest time, God had shielded us from this
mm-hmm.
knowledge. There's a passage in Daniel where it talks about, this knowledge is going to kind of be sealed up till the end times. Some people say that's the knowledge of the Nephilim that was kind of hidden from us for a while, and
Mm-hmm.
now it's kind of making a resurgence. I don't
Oh
know if
yeah.
that's true. It could be some
Mm-hmm.
other knowledge that we haven't seen yet. And finally, we're just kind of starting to notice, because there's so much going on in the world, that people are having to find a place to put
Put
this
it.
information.
Yeah.
So we can beat this topic to death, but let's transition to these pictures. And so when somebody sees something anomalous, um, they have to have a framework to put it in, or it kind of will eat you alive. So let me give you an example. A spider, all of us have a place to put that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Most of us put it in a category of a very creepy type creature. Some of them are poisonous. You don't want them on you. They crawl real fast. So you would consider it almost like a cryptid.
Mm-hmm.
Most people would say that they're terrifying. They're like shouldn't exist
Right.
type
Yeah.
of creatures, but they're very necessary. They eat other bugs, they keep
Mm-hmm.
bug populations down. Um, and then there's other people that like put them in a category of pet,
Oh yeah.
where they like, oh, I have 14 spiders. Oh, the tarantula escaped out of that aquarium 6 weeks ago and we haven't
Yeah.
seen it. And you turn around, it's on the back of their head,
Mm-hmm.
but they love that stuff. But nobody on earth doesn't have a category to put a spider in.
Right.
You either
Exactly.
kind of hate them or you love
Mm-hmm.
them, or if you're a pest control person, maybe you
They
put it
just
in the category of money,
right.
but you have a place to put it.
Mm-hmm.
But if all of a sudden, as we're recording this podcast, some sort of six-legged uh, reptile looking creature with a human head crawled up the wall, we'd have to figure out where we're going to put that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, what we're saying is we would consider it demonic here. We
Oh
would
yes.
consider it some sort of demonic manifestation, whether or not it is an actual creature that is manifesting, or if it's some sort of supernatural kind of projection that it's a demon representing itself to be something that would scare us to feed off our fear. So a lot of people, for example, would say Bigfoot is a spiritual creature because they can't catch them. They can become flesh and blood human, but if you try to track one down, they disappear.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
footprints. All of a sudden, it'll disappear right in the middle of a field. Where did this thing go? They think that some people say they come from another dimension. And so they have little portals that they can kind of disappear into. And so they crossed over into our dimension. And as soon as they know we've spotted them, they go back to their dimension. And in their dimension, that's what people look like. Tons of things it could be, right? But we have to put a category around things. And so what we're trying to do is give you that framework. So let's get to the listener letter just to kind of put this to bed before we jump into our picture. I believe that you met a demonic entity. Am I saying that's what it is? No, it could have been a big ape. But I believe that's what it is. And I believe that it was manifesting in a way either to test you or to get you afraid or to get you to doubt that you're safe and those types of things. And demonic entities are always after us. How they do that can be anywhere from a very subtle kind of plot against you. They can work through other people. They can also manifest. And the more that progresses, the more that you need to be on guard. The solution to this is if you live in a wooded area and you see these creatures, are you praying? Somebody said, what if they're angels? And our view of what an angel is because of art is that these either cherub-like beings with these little wings or these majestic type creatures. Are they angels that have fallen and they lost their wings and the muck of earth has uglied them up? But
will they make you feel happy or sad or scary or?
I think we should pray is what we believe. So if you see one of those things and you feel the fear, your next response should be to pray. Now, because we are weirdos, we decide when we see something anomalous, we get out our camera and take a picture and do our best to snap a picture and then try to flip the video on. And by the time the video loads up, the thing has disappeared behind the hill. So what we are going to do is we are going to discuss this photo. Now, if you listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Amazon or iHeart or wherever you listen to your podcasts, we're going to encourage you to go to our social medias. And our social medias, just to kind of give you an idea so you know where to find this. Probably the best way for you to look at these is going to be on Instagram. And Instagram is at Deliverance Project, at the Deliverance Project. And just look for our logo with the little Archangel Michael with kind of a orangish type, brownish type background. We're going to post this photo and then some subsequent photos. If you are on TikTok, we're going to do a whole video about it. So if you're a TikTok person, we're going to break down the major photo and then some things we found within the photo, and you'll be able to zoom in on it at your leisure. You'll also find it on Snapchat. And so TikTok is Deliverance Project. Snapchat will be under Anthony.Corelli. If you watch on YouTube or Rumble, instead of us just putting a thumbnail, at this point in the podcast, I'm actually going to take the time and insert the photos as we're talking so you can kind of get an idea of what we're talking about here. And on Facebook, of course, it's the Deliverance Project as well. And so if you're not watching on YouTube or Rumble, that's where you're going to find these pictures. So I would, if you're on your phone, I'd pause this real quick, go bring up the picture, come back and listen, and then you can kind of follow along as you zoom in yourself. So we were out and about in a little town called Parker, Colorado. If you don't know where Parker is, if you're listening from somewhere in the universe, Parker is a suburb of the Denver metro area. It's kind of in the southeastern kind of part of the metro area. If you're not familiar with Denver, everything is divided by I-25. The Interstate 25 goes right through the center of Denver. So people either live on the west side of I-25 or on the east side of I-25. Parker kind of fits just on the east side of I-25 in a little community that's basically a county called Douglas County. Douglas County is a pretty affluent county, lots of beautiful homes, lots of what I would call suburbs. It's the suburbs.
Yeah.
Beautiful landscaping. All of the neighborhoods are HOA covenant controlled places. So unlike where I grew up in the hood, nobody has cars up on blocks in the front yard and nobody can paint their house fluorescent green.
Can't even park your boat in the
Can't
driveway. It
park
has
your
to
boat
go in your
in the backyard
garage.
or in a covered space in your backyard or garage. So these are very covenant controlled communities. And as we bring up this picture, you're going to notice that we're online. A group of cars is waiting to turn. So there's a stop sign. You'll notice a little car just parked in front of us, and we're waiting to turn. We're kind of at a road, and then we got to go up a road and turn to the right. So we're just waiting because this is stop sign area, not traffic light area. Most of the suburbs have stop signs because only the main roads have lights because it's all suburbs, right? So if you'll notice in the photo, you will notice that there's a car in front of us. There's some trees. There is a kind of, I would say, like a grassy area. That how we'd put it? A grassy area to the right. And then you're going to notice that at the very top of the picture, kind of on the hill type area, you're going to notice that there is a figure. And just above the figure, which you would think was the windshield, like bugs on a windshield, is some sort of black mist. So if you're looking, you see the car in front of us. Looks like a little Nissan car, a little kind of grayish car. Last 3 digits of the license plates are 422, but we're not going to give you the whole part. Please don't stalk these people. And then you'll see the stop sign. And just above the stop sign and the green signs.
Like a sidewalk, like where
there's a sidewalk.
they're building another subdivision. So it's that space
little
and then the sidewalk.
Aspen trees with leaves. So we've been sitting on this picture for a little while. You'll see the leaves have almost fallen off, but just in front of that gray car is a stop sign. And then in front of that is an SUV. So we are not turning on the street where the stop sign is. We're going up to the next street. And if you look past that street, just above the green street signs, which tell you which intersection you're at, you'll notice a figure. Now, at first, you're going to say, well, there's just somebody walking up there. But the picture may not do it justice. I will guarantee you, if somebody who's listening is very smart and knows how to do all that really smart guy math or smart woman math, you can take the other things around it and figure out that this thing is extremely tall. Oh,
yeah. It's huge.
If you told me this thing was less than 7 feet, I would be shocked.
Oh, yeah.
Now, could it be a 6'10", 7 foot tall person walking? I'm not saying it's not. But I will tell you that above that, you will see this black sort of mist, kind of, I would say, above its shoulder, just right behind its head. That is not on the windshield. That was not in the picture, in our vision when we took the picture.
Exactly. Yep.
That did not exist before the picture. Now, did some mysterious animal fly by? Did smoke from a car go by? I'm not saying I know, but we're going to get to this in a second. So if you go back to this creature, this person, whatever you want to call it, zoom in on it. I dare you. There are no features at all. And if you're looking at this picture, you can see the orange leaves of the tree, the bright red of the stop sign. You will see the tannish little section of wall that it's getting ready to walk behind. you will see the silver of the light pole that it just passed. But
Mm-hmm.
when you look at this creature, it is all shadow.
Mm-hmm.
There's no facial features. If you zoom in, you might be able to see that maybe it's wearing like a longer jacket,
It just had like really long
long arms.
arms. It's almost like that's what caught our attention. Was like, wait a minute, that guy's like really tall and he's got really long arms. And like you said, when the fence is even those like fence they put in communities, almost like the sound barriers. So those are at least what 8 feet, 9 feet tall. And as he was walking, you can still see the top of his head.
Yeah. So as he's walking to, in your picture, it would be to your right. As he's walking, he's going behind. And so the sidewalk, or if there was a sidewalk up there, it's just dirt up there. But if he was walking on that little dirt path that he's walking on, it would start to go down. So as he goes to the right past the trees, there's a fence there that's very high. But even as he was walking, and he was walking fairly quickly, so just keep in mind, snap a picture, go to your iPhone, try to flip it to video, you hold it
Exactly.
back up, try to zoom in,
And it was gone.
and its head was just right going under the fence. Like, it was like almost like
you going down, play that
going
game,
down an
like just
escalator. Like a stairs.
like you play the game, go down the stairs, like you're getting smaller and smaller, your head's going away, but you're really not going downstairs.
So let's kind of take a look at the photo in a creepier manner, and then we'll come back and kind of put
But
it
the
out
weird
there.
thing about it was when after we took the photo and then we was trying to take the video, and when it was walking by that fence, it never came out. Like it never came out at the end of the fence, because we can still see the street or still see the road where he was walking, because there's other people. I think there is a sidewalk there, because you can see other people walking their dogs, and then you can see them come out as that fence end to go over to cross the road, like where the stop sign is, to get to the next house, just like you're walking across the street.
Yeah.
And so it never came to the
Yeah.
end of the fence. It went away.
Yeah. It disappeared.
Disappeared.
And so as we kind of look a little deeper, let's look at this mist.
I didn't notice that until it was pointed out last night.
Well, what's funny is we showed it to some people, and the first thing somebody said is the person, the figure, the cryptid, whatever this thing is, could be just a person that was wearing all dark clothes and shadow. I don't know. But it's walking with the same gait as the Patterson Gimlin Bigfoot film, where the long swinging arms.
Yep.
Like if you've ever seen the Patterson Gimlin film, where the Bigfoot is walking and then it turns and looks over the shoulder and the arms are swinging,
Yeah.
you'll notice in the picture that it has a similar gait.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean some people don't walk swinging their arms, but this seems very pronounced. The creepy part to me, before we get to the mist, is that it turned and looked at us. And I mean, I felt like it was looking at me, because I felt like it knew I was taking a picture of it through the window. So I kind of leaned over almost towards the passenger side to the center of the window, because on the driver's side of the vehicle, I have all like the toll, the toll little pass and the oil change sticker. So I leaned in the middle and kind of dipped underneath the rear view mirror to try to get a good picture.
Because you don't want to be a creep and just video
Well,
people walking around.
I wanted a clear shot.
Yeah,
It wasn't
exactly.
that, but it almost
No,
seemed like
no.
when I got the camera in frame, it turned and looked.
Exactly. So you're trying to hide that you're not videotaping them.
Well,
or
I mean,
taking
it's
a
far,
picture.
so it was more of a feeling than it was I cared that this thing was looking at me. But let's go to the mist. So another friend of ours, a close person of ours, blew up the photo trying to get a really good look at the person, the figure, whatever it is. And in the mist, as you kind of dig into it, there's faces in that mist, or at least you can call it pareidolia, where these things look like faces. So as we get to these next photos, you're going to see these images, and they're circled so you can kind of see. So you can do this yourself. This is not something we faked. If you can tell, I would love somebody to say, I have some software. I know how to blow this thing up. I blew it up with good resolution.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the mayor of Parker, Colorado on a walk. He's a really tall guy. He was wearing a dark tracksuit
Mm-hmm.
and a ski mask. That's why he looked all black. I would love somebody to do that. Now, I was there. I saw this thing walking. Melissa saw it. There was also somebody in the back seat that saw it. And so we couldn't distinguish those features. And, you know,
And it was
obviously
daylight. It was like 5,
you could
4:40, 4:30.
you could see in the picture.
Yeah,
I actually think it was
early.
earlier than that.
Yeah.
But I think it was more late afternoon.
Yeah, exactly.
But we couldn't see that level of feature, and then we're tracking it. Then when it disappeared, so you'd have to show me a lot. But you know, but just with the evidence you have, we challenge you to do so. And so as you're blowing up the figure, blow up the figure and see if you see the faces in the mist that we do. Now, what is this mist? Again, most of the people we showed initially said, well, what did you have on your windshield? But there was nothing on the windshield. And I think that's evidenced by the fact of, look at the rest of the picture. It is crystal clear. There is not other bug guts on. This thing was not there when I took this picture. And so as you look at this photo, there is an example of something that in broad daylight in a very affluent suburban neighborhood, Parker, Colorado, that you might see a coyote. You
some
might
red fox,
you might
gold
see
fox,
some foxes, a bunch of rabbits, a bunch of people walking their dogs, nice cars, not a place that you would consider wooded. It's more of a kind of a foothills, kind of plains type area. There is no reason for this thing to be walking in the middle of the day. So people are starting to see these things more and more and more, including us. And so we've sat on this picture a while, kind of figuring out where this is going to go. And so we've concluded that today's the day. And so as you look at this, give us your comments, give us your feedback. Let us know what you think it is. A lot of you are going to say, it's just some tall dude walking. Like, leave him alone. But I would tell you that before we took this picture, in this neighborhood, there's still a lot of construction. There was probably behind us a couple of turns, 400 construction workers building homes. Probably on these same sidewalks, we saw at least 3 or 4 people or couples walking dogs. We didn't take pictures of any of that. Sitting at a stop sign, looking up and going, just to picture this in your mind, people. We're sitting at a stop sign. People in the car talking, laughing, having a good time, and all of a sudden saying, what is that? How long did it take? Well, it took all the way, if you're looking at the picture from my left, for us 3 in the car to have a small conversation and say, that person doesn't have a face. That person is all shadow or dark. What the heck is that? Grabbing my phone, hitting the button, flipping it up, letting it look at my face to register whose phone it is, hitting the button for camera, taking a picture, then trying to flip it to video and not being able to get it because it disappeared down the hill, turning the corner to see if we could find it up the road.
Right, exactly.
And all the people that were walking in the area, not necessarily on that same path, but in the area over there, because when you turn right, there's other houses and other things there. We can see those people walking their dogs, but this thing wasn't there anymore. And something this much taller than other people should have been way easier to find than those people. So do with that what you will. There is our little cryptid slash shadow man slash hybrid slash, I don't know what you want to call it. That's for you to comb over. I am not afraid of some of you saying we're making a big deal out of nothing, but I would just ask you that you put this in context. Look at the picture, blow it up, Tell me
Mhm.
what you see. If somebody told me, I just think that's a guy as a shadow person, fine. It
Mhm.
isn't going to bother us,
Mhm.
but listen to the whole story as well.
Yeah.
Um, you know, we are in the process of clearing out, pictures off of our phones and putting it in the cloud and stuff. We have tons of pictures.
Mhm.
This is the standout. This was the anomalous day, and it wasn't even a scary nighttime story. It's
Mm-mm.
right in the middle of the day.
It didn't scare me. It was just odd.
It
It
and
caught your attention like, gosh, what it's like,
yeah.
and how big it was and how tall and the way it was walking and the long arms.
Well, let's put it
So,
like this.
yeah.
You get all these Bigfoot videos, right?
Mhm.
And there's people like seeing this kind of dark furry creature behind a tree in the day, and they're zooming in with their camera trying to see it, and it peeks around. Is it fake? Is it real? I don't know, but it's in the middle of the day. They're trying to get a picture.
Mhm.
If you were in them woods in the middle of the night and you heard that creature and saw an eye peek around the corner at you, you'd be gone.
Mhm.
So because this was daylight, it allows you to not be so fearful and to be more curious. And that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
Christians and non-Christians alike, we have to start looking at answers for what these things are. And if it's end times where these beings and these Nephilim, because the Bible says that the end times will be like in the days of Noah.
Mhm.
That could mean a bunch of different things, but one of the things it could mean is that these Nephilim creatures are going to make a reappearance. It could just be the
Yeah.
depravity, as some people believe, but there could be more to that. So
Mhm.
we hope you've enjoyed this little kind of just a brief conversation about cryptids
Yeah.
and these types of creatures. You can always go back to previous episodes, especially season 1. We do an entire episode on what these things might be.
Mhm.
We also encourage you to do a bunch of homework. There are a bunch of different podcasts and people that you can kind of study. L.A. Marzulli, I don't know these people. They're not
Right.
paying me to say this.
Mhm.
One of the big dogs in this, Rick Renner. It's a guy that's gone and actually found what we believe is the real Noah's Ark. These people have a lot of teachings on this stuff. If you're just a podcast person, I don't know these gentlemen as well, but there's a podcast called Blurry Creatures. And it's a podcast where they interview big dogs and the zoological, also Christian type biblical realm to try
Mhm.
to come up with answers for what they call these blurry creatures, because these photos are always blurry.
Right.
Well, I would challenge you boys
Yeah.
that this picture isn't blurry. It
Uh-huh.
isn't. It is the clearest picture you're going to see.
Mhm.
And the phone we used, we just wish it had better zoom. Um, which is why we wanted the video probably to get this in action, so you didn't think we took a still shot. But
Mhm.
in the moment, it really was like, we got to get this documented because this
Mhm.
is not right.
Mhm.
And so this not so blurry photo of this not so blurry creature hopefully will kind of prompt you to go listen to those guys' podcast and just listen to the interviews they do with big dogs in the field.
Mhm.
And a lot of these big dogs don't agree with each other, but it does what we're doing now. It kind of
Mhm.
gives you a bunch of places where you can go find your own answers.
Mhm. Yep.
All right. Well,
All right.
let's just wrap up here. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget that this podcast is copyright The Struggle LLC. If you have a story of your own, you can reach out to us at the Deliverance Project Podcast at gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you just have a question or just want to write us a brief little question like that was in this letter, we'll
Mhm.
try to put it on the air, but more importantly, we'll try to get you the answers you need or the resources you need to help you with your spiritual battles or your questions or your paranormal intrigue. We're here to help you. Special shout out to Todd K at Todd K Voiceovers for his help with putting our voiceover work together for this podcast.
Mhm.
We hope that you check out the struggleseries.com.
Yep.
That's our website where you could find out about the books, about this podcast, the other podcast. There's even a donate button if you want to try to help us keep this podcast on the air and just find out more about us.
Yep.
So we hope to see you next time. Thank you so much, and may God bless you and bring you peace.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Deliverance Project. Make sure to subscribe, tell your friends, And we will see you next time